Hi again. I'm Pastor Mark Isaac at New Life Community in Dinuba. This week we're looking at the example of David, king of Israel, who lived faith in spite of years of uncertainty. I hope it's a help to you as we go through our own time of uncertainty these days. The examples we've seen so far from David and the ones that we'll see today happened in the years between his anointing as king and his actual becoming king over Israel. There were years of running from King Saul, who sought to kill David, years which made him think to himself in 1 Samuel chapter 27, verse 1 of these days I'll be destroyed by the hand of Saul. Yet the best thing I can do is to escape. Well, and he did. And yet David also lived his faith, and that's what's encouraging us today. Here are two examples. In 1 Samuel chapter 25, we find David on the edge. He is stressed out and he is on the verge of acting out of his anger and vengeance instead of trusting the Lord's plan for him. What's needed is for David to listen and to let his heart and will be changed, to not let an offense take root and then act out of that bitterness or self-pity or whatever it is that he's feeling. Here's the situation. First of all, the prophet Samuel, who had anointed David back in his boyhood, had just died, leaving no one of authority to verify David's anointing as king. Secondly, David was unable to be with Samuel because he was on the run, hiding from Saul, hiding with his men in the caves in the wilderness. They were also short on supplies and food, and so David had sent some men to talk to a rich rancher nearby, asking for his hospitality. David could easily have taken just the sheep that he wanted from this man's flocks, but he hadn't done it. He was asking nicely of a man who had not offered it on his own. Well, the man refused, and David became angry and prepared 400 of his fighting men with swords to go and to kill him. That's when the man's wife got word and intervened. Abigail was her name. And without telling her husband, she prepared the food and supplies for David and his men and took them to him herself. Catching him armed to the teeth and ready to descend on her household, Abigail arrived to apologize on behalf of her husband and to ask David to consider what it would be like for him years from now as king to recall how he might have acted if he'd shed blood and anger over something as simple as food. Well, David listened to her and he let his heart be changed. He said these words. He said, "Go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request." Wow, that's a big deal. It's not easy to accept when someone says something to you and to change your mind over that, especially when you're dead set on whatever it is that you've got your mind to do. But for you to change your mind under stress, well, Abigail took a big risk. But God gave David what he needed to let go of his anger and to listen to her and to let his heart be changed. That's key for us at New Life Community. We believe Jesus can transform lives, and I know that's true even in a time of uncertainty like we're in today. The last example I want to highlight from David's years of uncertainty actually didn't happen until years later when Saul had died and David had actually become king. In that moment when David was now in control and had the power to carry out his will as the king, he fulfilled a vow that he'd made when he was the one in trouble. In 2 Samuel chapter 9, David asks if there were any family members of Saul's still living. It would have been normal for them to have been put to death. And so when Saul's last grandson is found, David had to assure him, "Don't be afraid." And then David said these words, "I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." That fulfilled a promise that David made to Jonathan, Saul's son, when the two friends were not certain whether Saul truly meant to kill David. David had made a promise then and there that if he lived, he would never cut off his kindness from Jonathan's family. And so it was. There will come a time for us too, when we'll be done with all of this uncertainty. Let's ask ourselves, what are the commitments that we've made that suffered during this time? And what can we do to get those back on track when we emerge from all of this. See, no matter how you're coping, God can and God will use you in this and through this and after this as his mighty instrument of good news. Like David and Joseph before him, God has not forgotten you. So keep the faith and keep living it for the glory of God. Amen.